This is Candid Conversations with Dr. Mayfield, a podcast that resources families and friends with tools to have important conversations about mental and emotional health. This show is sponsored by Mayfield Counseling Centers, helping you find clarity, hope, and purpose. Here's your host, Trever Shirin.
Thank you for joining us on Candid Conversations. We are excited to continue our series about the steps of encouragement. Today is validation, step 1 in our process of encouragement.
Should we call the elephant in the room?
Yeah.
New studio?
We are currently in construction area for a new studio.
It's pretty cool.
Which I'll plug this week. We've got several new shows that are going to be coming to Mayfield Counseling Centers in the vein of resourcing the community. So stay in touch. We've got some really cool things coming up.
And for those of you that are just purely podcasters, we're going to actually ask you to stretch your comfort zone a little bit and tune into our YouTube channels, because this is where most of them will be posted.
Yeah.
And it's going to be fun. It'll be, 5-minute show and a 15-minute show, and it'll be really great resources on how to support you and your family and your community with mental health tips and tools.
And if you haven't already, Facebook is a great way to connect with us. We
is.
will be sharing some of that content on our Facebook page, and so you can find it directly there as well.
Awesome. Well, let's get into this validation topic. I know we're kind of switching up host roles today a little bit because you've done the research and more on the validation, and next session will be mine. But I think that I feel like, at least in my opinion, this phrase or that word gets thrown around way too much, and especially throwing your generation under the bus. And so I'd be curious to find out kind of what you're thinking. How does validation, engage the first step of this encouragement steps?
Yeah, so I think there's a little bit of a paradigm shift that we have to make in order to understand first, because I think there are two ideas of what validation are. There's I want you to validate how I feel validation.
Which is what your generation gets thrown under the bus a lot with,
right.
I think. Yeah.
And then I think for this, there's the validation of that is correct, or that's right, or yes, that's the way it is.
Okay.
So I think, they're so similar. It's the same idea, but we're not talking about validation in like, I'm really frustrated, I need you to validate my frustration.
Okay.
It's more of, this is how I'm doing something, and hearing, yes, that is the right way to do it.
Okay.
And so I'm
trying to process this right now. Yeah.
So the way it works in encouragement is, if we start at the very, very, very bottom of what is encouraging, if I am, let's say I'm getting ready to run a marathon. And so I'm getting up early and running, which anybody who knows me knows that this is an absurd example.
People that know you are laughing right now.
Right.
Yes.
But let's say this is what I'm doing. And so I wake up early in the morning and I start running. And I think, okay, I should run a mile every single day for a week, and then 2 miles, and then 3 miles, and then just keep going.
Sure.
So that's my plan. And to have somebody come to me who is an authority in running. So we have, I don't know any runners. We'll just say
Usain Bolt.
Usain Bolt comes up to me, because we're good buds.
Yep.
And he says, yeah, that's the right way to train for a marathon. You're doing that right. That is the primary foundational level of encouragement. And I think there's two ways to think about it too. This is the foundation, the bottom, but it's also the most surface level.
Okay.
Because we're not going deep on it. It's not saying anything about me or how I'm doing it. It's just the way in which I'm doing this is right.
So from a cultural expose on current generations that want everything validated.
Right.
Like, where did that come from, I wonder? So if that's the basic, it makes sense. That's the basic foundation of encouragement, is just it's surfacey. It's a calling out of that is right. You're doing that right. Where does this? In your experience or in your research, like, where does this I need to be validated on everything come from?
Some of this is skewed by where I am in life, but
Sure.
I feel like a lot of it comes from college. and maybe a little bit of high school as well. Because like my wife is a teacher at a high school in town, and sometimes she has to play the role of parent more often than teacher.
Okay.
And that's hard. And a lot of it is just because we've seen families sort of disintegrate over the past few decades where it's not the same as it used to be. And some of that's good. Some of it's really a travesty.
Yep. Most of it is, yeah.
But I think not having a place or a home where you can get the edification that you're looking for.
Which we're talking about in four
Right.
episodes, yeah.
You look for what you can, and it does feel good to hear from somebody like, yeah, that's right. Like, I'm really frustrated about this and this, and they can say, yeah, that's frustrating.
Yeah, it makes sense why you're frustrated.
I mean, counselors do this all the time. It's one of our
no rocket science there.
It's like the screwdriver in our toolbox. It's just super common. And I think that's some of it, and like college campuses can tend to placate to that a little bit. And that's, a horrible stereotyping.
Oh, it is horrible.
Colleges.
I mean, thinking about the safe zones that popped up after Trump became president because people's feelings were hurt. Do they need to be validated? Or, like where do we draw the line with that kind of stuff?
And I think, like, for me, I both totally get and kind of disagree with trigger warnings. Like, I get it. Like, I understand why there are trigger warnings and why people want them to exist.
Sure.
And at the same time, I kind of wonder if that removes an opportunity for resiliency training or grit building.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think that in some ways there's got to be a healthy balance of how do we validate, when do we validate, what's worth validating, what's going, and it goes back to our conversation last episode with about my father-in-law.
Yeah.
Like, are you getting a freaking paycheck?
Right.
Did you get called into the HR? But that's the validation. And I do think you're right that it's in the last couple of decades because of the state of our culture and the direction that we're going in a lot of different ways. That simple validation of, hey, you're okay, you're good, you're on the right track. We're not getting it from the sources that we need to get it from. Which brings me to my next question for you is, are there some precursors, are there some foundational things that need to happen for validation to stick or to have can anybody validate anybody? I guess is what I'm asking. Or there needs to be like a precursor relationship, a foundational, whatever.
Well, and I think this is kind of where our step idea both falls apart and gets solidified.
Sure.
Because I think that sometimes we can't hear validation unless we have edification and vice versa. And so if I'm not secure in who I am as a person,
sure,
hearing that I did something right is not going to do anything.
No.
And if I hear that I'm doing something right all the time, or don't hear that I'm doing anything right ever, and somebody says, hey, you are an amazing person and a wonderful worker, it kind of feels out of the blue and it doesn't have much of a foundation to it or legs to stand on. And so I think we can validate anyone, and I think it's important that we do, and recognize that for the validator, it's not their job to make sure that the validated gets it. Like, we're not responsible for it sticking.
Sure, but it's maybe our job to notice it or whatever.
Yeah, I think it's just important that we are giving validation because it's easy. I mean, it's really easy to give validation of like, yeah, that was the right way to do it, or hey, I noticed you did it that way and that seemed to work better.
How do you, or what should we do? I think our listeners are probably thinking about, okay, my kid needs validation, but they really stink at running.
Yeah.
Like, how do but they really need validation. It's like those individuals that come on like American Idol and they think they can sing because mama's told me I can sing for so long.
Yeah.
Nope, can't sing.
It's a good question.
Like, how do you find that balance of speaking truth and yet, speaking validation?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great question. I've talked to a few people about how important it is to be genuine with our words.
Yeah.
Specifically, my supervisor, she was asking me like what I would say after a session with a certain person. And one of them was like, I really enjoyed our time. And she's like, is that true? And I was like,
no, I'm being polite.
Not really. And she's like, then don't say it.
Yeah.
And so I think validation can be the same way, but at the same time, it can be as simple as if they suck at running,
Sure.
if they're just not good at running, they don't go very far, finding the thing that is going right. And so if their goal is to run 5 times a week and they're running 4 times a week, you can validate, like, hey, I noticed that you went out to do 5 days a week and you're doing 4.
Good job.
You're really close to your goal. That's awesome. And that, that it's surface level. And so we're not digging deep for something. We're just finding something. And sometimes it means going out a little bit further to a different perspective.
Makes sense.
Of not as far as, but in the direction of, you're still breathing.
Good job.
Good job. And sometimes, there are days.
I can just see people that are listening to this right now, and they're like, "Yeah, I have nothing else but to say, good job. You're breathing well.
You're breathing well." Right. And honestly, there are probably, I can think of a handful of days this semester that I would have taken that and been like, "Oh man, you're right. I am breathing so consistently.
I'm doing something right. This is awesome." That was,
yeah. So that's like probably way too surface level.
Right.
But we want to go that direction because I think it's really important to not skip steps in encouragement.
And that's what I'm thinking too, is as we're talking about these steps, there's got to be an earned, probably safety, an earned vulnerability and trust in getting to the edification or encouragement step, right?
Yeah.
Because I think if I had somebody come up to me and say, you know what, you're this, and this, edification, let's say, or
identity,
encourage me, or kind of stuff. And I'd be like, who the heck are you? Have we met before?
Right.
Versus, hey, I really enjoyed your talk.
Yep.
Great. Thanks.
That was a good talk.
Yeah. That's validation.
Yep.
Maybe some affirmation thrown in there, which we'll talk about next episode. But it's not speaking to my identity. But if that person comes to every talk that I do and they see a growth projection or whatever, and they're able to hey, you were really vulnerable this time. Way to go. That showed your character, and it showed your, and they have history with me.
Right.
Then it's like, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I can't tell you how many times I've been in being in former ministry and that kind of stuff where people just jump to the extreme, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm not going to swear right now, but who the heck, are you to even?
Yeah, you can't speak truth about who I am without knowing me.
Right, but people do it all the time.
Yeah,
or try to do it all the time.
Well, and I think it's because edification feels the best when we receive and when we give it, and it can feel really good even if it's not founded.
Well, yeah, finding that false sense of security or that false sense of, I think our world is full of that. It's a whole nother.
It's like a horoscope,
right?
It's got enough of generalizations and positive and negatives to be applicable to literally anyone.
Yeah.
And we ourselves pull it out, and I think sometimes our edification can be that way. And if we learn the process of this validation, we're learning to pinpoint the things that are worth commenting on. And so on your talk, I could say like, hey, every single time you were thinking that you were stepping ahead of where you were and you went to the next slide, you were actually right on track. That was really cool.
Right. It's validation.
Validation.
Yep.
And it's simple. You kind of have to think about it, but
it's simple, but I could see our listeners going, okay, help break it down. You both are, counselors.
And we have a little bit of a home field advantage.
We have a little bit of home field advantage. Break this down in a layperson's term. Like, how do I get better at validating? What would you say?
There's a concept in play therapy called tracking.
Okay.
And
break it down.
Basically what you're doing is you're forgetting everything you know about language and you're saying what they're doing.
Right.
And so
it feels really weird, by the way.
Oh, it's so weird. But I think it teaches a really valuable lesson. Mm-hmm. So Mark, if you were to pick up that phone, I would say you picked that up. You're looking at that. You're closing it. Now it's on the table. Like, that's tracking.
Right.
And it's this wiping away of language. And I think if we do the same thing with validation and look at it the same way of this thing happened, you did this, this thing went here. That kind of language is the validation language. If you're adding flowery language of like, Mark grabbed the phone and lifted it to his face where the light illuminated his eyes and you could see the joy of knowing
a satire or drama.
You've gone too far. That's not this stage. You've gone a little bit too far on that. This is so broken down that we're saying you're sitting there even though this is happening.
But why do we mess it up? Why is it become so difficult then to validate? Is it something in us? Is it something in our society? Is it something? I mean, be honest. This is Candid Conversations here.
Yeah, I think it's our society. I think I've ranted about this before of our hyperbolic nature. That it can't just be good. It has to be really good. It can't just be really good. It has to be the best. It can't be the best. It has to be the best ever. And what that does is it takes away the power of the word good.
Sure.
And I think we've lost the power of the word good. So that validation isn't enough. It has to be, you are the best at picking up your phone. I've never seen anyone pick up their phone like that. Oh my gosh. you know?
Sure.
And that's a natural progression because we want to be better than and get better than and say something better than, because we think that if I say you picked up that phone really well, that it won't be enough.
We're worried it won't be enough, or we've assumed it won't be enough, or we're projecting it won't be enough. I mean,
I think all
the above.
Probably.
Which is interesting that you say that, because I go back to when we created the Who Can Relate curriculum.
Yeah.
And one of the questions we have in there this is our upstream suicide prevention curriculum for El Paso County right now in the schools. And we ask the question, who loves you?
Right.
And one of the scenarios we use in that is, how do you know somebody loves you versus, we say we love our pizza, and then in the same breath, oh, I love you.
Right.
Like, well, that loses its value because of the same example that you've given about how we are searching for validation or those kinds of things.
Yeah.
So I think that's the thing is I want our listeners to stick with us over the next couple episodes, because this might feel almost empty for some people, or hollow or hard or lacking in that, well, if all I do is validate, that's not okay.
Right.
But
you're probably right. If
to some
you're
degree,
just validating, maybe there is some truth to that.
But think about it as laying that foundation. Think about what they do when they lay a foundation of a house. Like, they just don't dig a hole and pour concrete.
Right.
I mean, they dig the hole, they level it, they set the supports up.
They set up their plumb lines.
They put the rebar in, then they pour the concrete.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I feel like we're doing with these stages is we're preparing everything so that the foundation can hold.
Yeah.
And the foundation really is, if we're doing all these stages or steps of encouragement, we're valuing people, we're seeing people, we're providing the whole attachment theory, right? We're seeing them, we're providing safety, they're feeling soothed, and now they have this secure base which they can launch from.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's room for the other concept of validation of like, yeah, that sucks, where that can be really encouraging too.
Right.
And I mean, if you think about building a house, when you lay the foundation, that plumb line is literally just how you keep everything level.
Straight.
It is
Square.
your level.
Yep.
Everything has to match up with that plumb line. And so we're laying the foundation, and eventually you may not really think about validation very much, but it will come out in the way you're edifying and encouraging people.
Become second nature almost.
Yeah, and that's the goal. Because I think that you can give an encouragement that has all 4 steps in one sentence.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, we'll have to figure that out.
And we'll build it as we go. But
Right.
I think for right now, it's important to just sit with, that was good.
Right. Yeah, I think that's great. Well, thanks for bringing that to the forefront today. As always, right, if you have questions, we'd really encourage you to reach out and email us at candid@mayfieldcounseling.com. If you're wanting to leave a review, please do share this with a friend. I think this will be a really powerful, could be a really powerful series. So join us next time.
That was good.
Yeah, tell us that was good. That's awesome.
Catch you next week.
Thank you for joining Candid Conversations. If you would like more information, you can email candid@mayfieldcounseling.com or call 719-452-4803.